What's up? What's good, wonderful people? Testing one, two, testing one, two. What's up? What's good, everybody? It is I, Chauncey Craig Woodson, yours truly. Welcome to a special audio edition of Chauncey and Chat Live. Hope you like the little Red Hope vibe I got going on right here. Figure I don't have to cam up all the time, so use a little something. And I think this is appropriate for what we're about to do today. And today, what I got going on is gonna be talking to you all about horror movies, one of my favorite genres out here. I love me some action, love some comedy, love almost everything film wise, but horror kind of speaks to me in a special, interesting kind of way. And like everybody else who likes horror, they have their certain type of subgenres, which I'm gonna get into today also, and we're also just gonna chop it up. Just put all my thoughts and feelings out here about horror in general, about my likes, dislikes, what could be done better, things I would so hope to see in the near future, and so on. So, like anybody else out there who has followed horror out there for quite some time, my journey into horror dates back into the late 70s, early 80s. Back when I used to live on the west side of Chicago, I remember the Saturday morning, late Saturday morning slash early afternoons, I used to sit up and watch Spenguli. For those of my Chicago heads out there, you know what Spenguli is about. And used to watch all the little horror stuff that they used to showcase on there. Of course, with it being on broadcast, national broadcast TV, some stuff was edited here and there, but they didn't show anything too outrageous. They mainly showed just like the classics: Dracula, Frankenstein, werewolf, mummy, creature from Black Lagoon, those type of things. They'll occasionally show some other cool stuff that I've gotten into over time, such as the Godzilla movies. I'm always a sucker for the Godzilla movies from back in the day, no matter how horribly bad they were made, but it was made for the sake of camp and for the sake of, just pure campy entertainment. So couldn't take it as serious as some folks take some of their movies do nowadays. But anyhow, that's kind of like my first foray into horror. And then, as time progressed, I start, experiencing the iconic movies, shall we say, of horror. Movies that really defined certain genres and certain eras. And mainly with like the 70s and 80s, you had your iconic pieces such as The Omen, The Exorcist, Jaws, Halloween, Friday the 13th, and then, of course, going more into the 80s side of things, like Nightmare on Elm Street, um, Critters, Gremlins. I mean, I can go on and on about this. And, growing up, of course, I had to have my quote unquote, using air quotes. You probably can't see me using air quotes, of course, but anyhow, my parental supervision in the form of my either one of my older brother, or one of my older sisters, or more so even my older cousins. Shout out to my family, of course. They were my parental supervision at the time, where I watched certain movies I probably shouldn't have watched, but thanks to them, I kind of got into this whole thing of liking horror like I do. And it was just something that just really kind of helped build my creativity, not only as a person, but just as an overall film enthusiast about what I enjoy about this. So, kind of, stepping back a little bit, piggybacking a little bit. Um, when I think of horror, especially good horror these days, I more so gravitate to, like I said, like the late 70s, early 80s. And, some of the movies I just mentioned, they pretty much put such outrageous, if not hellified, no pun intended, impact on, how people perceive horror, how people are stricken by certain images, certain sounds, certain themes. And that's what's really tripped out amazing about this. And if I have to go back, say a little bit more, I think one of the most groundbreaking aspects of horror to me, not only with the golden age characters like I aforementioned, I probably have to say Night of the Living Dead was an iconic piece in horror film history. Mainly because it was a movie that just basically kind of spoke to a lot of people about, just uncertain terrors that have come about because of, what's going on in the undead. And of course, with the time frame that it took place, you had something where they did something that was never before mentioned, especially in those late 60s times where you had a lead black character who was a hero, and he pretty much kind of helped lead groups of other people who were, mainly white, that basically shouldn't have to or didn't have to listen to, this lead hero. And shout out to the late great Dwayne Jones. But, he did his thing. He didn't, do the stereotypical bucking of eyes and, oh, what we gonna do now, man? What we gonna? He didn't do none of that. He was cool, calm, collect. He was bold. He was brave. He thought about things that had to be done in order to maintain survival. And of course, spoiler alert for anybody who didn't watch Night of the Living Dead like that. Even though he transcended a lot of the adversity that was happening throughout the majority of the film, he sadly met his unfortunate demise due to some racist individuals who sadly took him out at the end, thinking he was basically one of the undead, which he wasn't. And, shout out to the brethren, Mr. Anthony Smith and Brother Corey Green. Thank you for joining me out here today. Figure I'd do a little audio action instead of doing a little cam up action. But kind of going back and forth to it, like horror after Night of the Living Dead, you had your creative folks out here who want to see what can you do and what could be added more to the horror side. So then in the 70s, when you have stuff like, for example, The Exorcist. Exorcist, a lot of people say to this day, it's still one of the scariest movies of all time. And I mean, as I've spoken before, stuff like imagery, the audio, the music that was used into it, and it showed another aspect of where, hey, if we're going to do this type of thing, if we're going to make something of this nature where you have a character or characters, to let it be known that, hey, an entity such as the devil exists in that universe or reality, we got to make it as real and as unbelievable as possible. And they accomplish that. I mean, to this day, a lot of folks, you mention this, and if you even see like glimpses or even like a little picture of anything that happened from the Exorcist, like people kind of like either freak out or they just like get chills because it put that type of effect on folks when they watch this movie. Then, of course, following up with that, another movie considered one of the scariest films of all time being Jaws. Now, a lot of people think, how can Jaws be scary? It's just a shark doing shark stuff. Well, the impact of that movie is the fact is this is something that can actually happen in reality. I mean, there have been actual shark attacks that have happened in real life. Maybe not on the level of what you have seen in like, what happened in Jaws, but it made a basic major statement by being like, a scary film to where this is something that can happen in real life. Not only just that, it was actually the first big Hollywood blockbuster because it's a movie that made $100 million and then some. And then, of course, to this day, like X's, if you mention anything about Jaws, you see all types of paraphernalia that's going on. You got people rocking Jaws t-shirts. You got, all types of things that are going on in here and that are just really how can I say it? Jaws is just, one of those iconic type of films that a lot of cinephiles like to gravitate towards too, because of what Steven Spielberg did and what he did in terms of the process of this movie. And quiet as kept, I'm gonna embarrass myself a little bit. For those of you all hey who did watch that movie, basically the scene where little Alex Kitchener gets the unfortunate chomping of the shark, that kind of took me out as a little kid. Because I mean, that scene in particular, because that just shows that when it comes to horror, especially, kids ain't even safe. So like, for a good chunk of my childhood, because that scene, I could barely watch Jaws like I used to up until, of course, I grew out of that. But at the time, being a little kid, especially around 5, 6 years old, yeah, that scene right there in particular was kind of earth shattering, especially for young folks. And then, like, after you go through all those kind of phases with that, you get into another level of what is known iconic today as the slasher film. And I say, courtesy of John Carpenter on Halloween, you have your slasher genre where you have a mass killer who is like deeply disturbed, obviously, and he moves in silence. He doesn't say anything. It just the way he kills people is just it's shocking, but yet at the same time too, it's quite inventive where you can come up with a character of that nature. And then as time progresses, hold on one second, I apologize. Just trying to get a certain little things going on, what have you. But anyhow, um, Halloween did a great deal for slashers, and then of course I can't forget because you got other genres too of that. Well, I'm saying other characters in the slasher genre that happens with that also. Another prime example of that is that of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and that's like even before we experienced like Halloween. Texas Chainsaw Massacre was really the real deal in terms of your slasher genre because you had character known as Leatherface walked around like raving homicidal maniac who basically wore the skin of his victims on his face, and he would take them out with chainsaw. But also, he was part of a family of psychopaths who were cannibals, and it was just all types of craziness and stuff done. Well, that was done in that movie was just so wild that it was unbelieved that it could be happening, right before other people's eyes. But in actuality, it just kind of speaks to the horrific nature of, actual people who are out here like this, like, cannibals, serial killers, and things of that nature. And I think that's what Texas Chainsaw Massacre spoke to at that time. And of course, if we fast forward back a little bit from Leatherface to Michael Myers, then you have Jason Voorhees. And of course, the Friday 13th genre is what goes on with that. And Friday 13th is definitely an iconic fix because you get the four-way into Jason Voorhees and again another deeply disturbed individual who was sadly tormented because you have your archetype characters where they were like freaked out by someone who wasn't accustomed to what this character looked like and how he sounded and how he acted, and they just tormented this poor soul. And when he was tormented, they basically got a good little cutting up of sorts. And spoiler alert on this one, courtesy of Mrs. Voorhees, Jason's mother. And then, of course, when she met her demise in the first movie, Then Jason went ahead, took on the slashing business from Mother Dearest, and from then on, he perceived to make his iconic pathway of destruction and maiming, killing, slashing, and of course we got the real iconic flavor in part three, where got to don the iconic hockey mask, and it's been so many cool ways that you've seen the hockey mask, whether it's you know all clean or dirtied up and cracked up, and of course as you follow I'm sorry, as you follow the series, you see how crazy Jason turns out to be in this. So that's what kind of like what Friday 13th has done. And of course, how can we forget about any slashers? And of course, probably the most popular slasher and my favorite slasher, personal favorite, Mr. Freddy Krueger. And again, I got to shout out to my cousins for this because I remember back in Christmas of 84, 85, spent the night with my cousin's house on the south side of Chicago. And we were up like, it wasn't so much late night, but more early morning. And we just ended up watching Nightmare on Elm Street. And after watching Nightmare on Elm Street, I was just in awe of how wild and just disturbing but yet so cool of a character Freddy Krueger was. I mean, he basically, as you already know who Freddy Krueger is, he taps into your dreams and brings out your greatest fears, and once he brings out your greatest fears, that's his way of killing you. And of course, the main thing of Freddy Krueger is can't fall asleep. And if you fall asleep, and you're pretty much done for. And just the inventive ways Freddy Krueger can take you out and kill you was just really amazing. And of course, as like Jason, he's got an iconic library of sequels that basically shows what he is capable of and what he can do. And I know for some people, Freddy is kind of more of a jokester than he is a real threat. But hey, for those who follow characters like, say, the Joker, I mean, just because somebody, can be a jokester and so on, you can see how psychotic they really are when it comes down to it. And that's how I feel Freddy Krueger is, but he does that more on the horror side than say what the Joker would have done in like the comic book side of things. I know it's kind of an apples and oranges comparison, but that's what I kind of think of when I think of Freddy Krueger. He's kind of sort of got a slight Joker complex when it comes to the way he, combats characters throughout the movies that he's done over the years. And these are 3 or 4 iconic characters that have spawned off a multitude of other characters. I mean, you got your slashers from Chucky and Child's Play, another inventive character where a serial killer basically transfers his soul into a what they call a good guy doll, or as what we grew up with back in the day, My Little Buddy. And that basically tormented some kids too, because you would think the last thing that would freak you out is a beloved toy turns on you, and then next thing you know is chasing you all around trying to kill you or trying to obtain your soul and this and that. Then you get to other characters such as like Pinhead, which basically almost slightly similar into the vein of Freddy, except that it's more so with Hellraiser and Pinhead. They kind of speak to more of how should I say it? It almost kind of speaks to like the vein of like the 7 deadly sins, like how greed, lust, gluttony, and that type of thing. And that's kind of what I got from watching the Hellraiser movies. They basically are entities that would attack you based off whatever sin you committed out there. whether it was adultery, whether it was, again, like I say, gluttony, whether it was vanity. And these were characters that just found such a great way to tap into, you know, your desires and fears, and would just basically mess you up from that. And, as time progresses, you have just so many iconic characters that I could think of that, I could name off, but, I want to not spend a whole lot of time, but just enough time to explain what I've witnessed in regards to growing up with horror. And I think as time went on and with the mainstream media in regards to film at that time coming up, they just wanted to capitalize off it by making like constant sequels and based on these characters. And I think after maybe the third, fourth iteration film wise, when you start churning out all these movies, it kind of wanes the characters. It kind of sometimes make the characters not so much not as likable as when they first came about, but not as imposing as what they used to be. And I think one of the bad things in regards to horror is when you get into that vein of sequelitis. Like uh my guy Corey Green here gave per example Jason X. Yeah, I'm gonna get into that shortly. Cause after, say for example, when you get characters and you get to a point where you take them into outer space, yeah, that's kind of an eyesore. I mean, it's a laughably bad type thing. Then I guess it's kind of become a sight gag more than anything. But when you get to taking iconic characters into outer space and making them do goofy stuff that are actually aforementioned to like sci-fi, that's when it kind of takes you out. It kind of diminishes the luster that the characters have. And kind of things that also make me trip out is like the archetype characters. As I've mentioned, when in regards to Friday the 13th, it seems like every other sequel of a horror movie has the archetypes of, the dumb jock, the a-hole, the the bitchy prom queen chick, the little cohorts that they have surrounding them. And, you would have maybe like one or two geeky characters that you kind of sort of feel sorry for. But then again, it's like you can't feel so much sorry for them because they hang around with a bunch of douchebags that don't give a damn about them. And then at the end of the day, they meet their demise just like everybody else. So it's all right a few times, but when it seems like it's every other horror movie that comes up with these same archetypes, I think that's what has diminished horror over time. Now, I will say, Scream, I credit for reemerging the genre because basically putting shall I say, a meta approach to what horror had turned out to be. Because Scream is also basically it's basically an overall commentary about the horror genre in general and what we've come up with. And this is a movie that came out legit 25 years ago, and I still shake my head and trip out and believe that it's been 25 years since Scream came out and has done what it's done. It brought us kind of a new twist on the archetype characters, making them a little more likable, a little more smarter than what we were used to from back in those days. And then Scream, because of Scream, we launch off into things like I Know What You Did Last Summer, what else? Urban Legend. And throughout time, even though it was kind of picking back up in terms of things, it also basically was kind of sliding back into those things of the archetypes of your same old type characters. I will give credit though, especially to late great Wes Craven. He did sprinkle in some diversity involved into some of these characters, so you didn't have the same old characters every go around and every other sequel. There were hints of diversity, whether it was cultural diversity with African Americans, Latinos, Asians, or even a little bit of diversity in regards to like LGBTQ folk. And I think because of what Wes Craven did with that, it kind of gave better and greater inspiration for prime example, someone like a Kevin Williamson, who is, you know, the mainstay in regards to creating the Scream franchise as being screenwriter. And as well as, you've known him for other stuff too. He also helped with I Know What You Did Last Summer. And especially coming from the mind of a openly gay man who did this type of thing, I got to my hat to him also. He did a pretty bang up job on helping recreate the genre, recreate characters that weren't, so stereotypical as time progressed. And kind of fast forwarding a little bit to how horror is really defined these days, I gotta give credit to like a lot of indie directors and actors and actresses. I feel like the independent film genre in general is basically what is keeping horror alive to this day. Because especially if you've watched certain little movies like, dare I say, Human Centipede, or you watch a movie like another kind of favorite of mine over the time, Starry Eyes. These are like movies that you know, don't have to succumb to like, your mainstream studio standards. They go balls to the wall. They, unleash all types of crazy, insane uh, visual insanity because a lot of blood and gore that has taken place in those type of movies or something else. And of course, I can't forget, and apologize if I'm skipping around here and there, can't forget about someone like Eli Roth, because Eli Roth, you got guys like, well, not guys, I'm sorry, more so like Hostel. Hostel is kind of like the movie that kind of introduced the world to like torture porn, shall I say. And it's like excessive blood, excessive gore, just all types of crazy kills that happen. And also the Saw franchise. The Saw franchise is Saw, Final Destination. These are basically your torture porn movies where let's see who can come up with the coolest kills. And dare I say, these are three movie series that have come up with the coolest kills on how anybody and everybody could die. And that's what's so crazy about them. And it's just amazing what has been done over the years in regards to horror. Now, like I've said, I think sequels and reboots have been that hindrance, because with sequels, if you haven't done anything fresh or better than what you did the last time, outside of like kills and outside of story, it's not gonna fare as well as it does. And then like when you try to reboot characters, iconic characters especially, I think that's proven to be a big no-no. Because nothing against Rob Zombie, I think he's talented musician. He seems like he can be an okay film director in terms of visual aesthetics, but him doing Halloween, I think, was a big disservice to the Michael Myers character. I feel like Michael Bay, besides destroying what we know and love as the live action Transformers universe, him and his production company Platinum Dunes for trying to do the Friday the 13th remake. It was the it was just like highly stylized, remakes of everything and anything you've seen in past Jason movies, and it just wasn't anything too special or exciting. And the worst one to me in regards to the remake treatment, yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street, the 2010 version. I wasn't feeling it at all. Um, to me, it was just so bad and it was just so abysmal. I just couldn't believe, why would you even bother on touching that type of movie. That's my deal with that. I will say another thing in regards to horror, though, and I know I'm just kind of rambling off and on, but just speak my piece about the horror genre since it is spookiest time of the year. I do like the fact that, especially nowadays, horror is about diversity more than anything. And with horror, you see characters like, say, characters African American, Asian, Latino, they're not succumb to the stereotypes that they have had to endure over, like, in especially like the 80s and 90s, where you have to be, just because you're black you have to be this type of character, or just because you're Latino or Asian you have to be this type of character, or if a character is gay or lesbian you have to only adhere to this part of the story. There's pretty much a great inclusion for everybody, and I'm kind of glad that it's well showcased, especially with stuff like Lovecraft Country, stuff like the latest Candyman reboot. And I say that's probably a surprisingly good reboot. And I know some people have their mixed views about it, but this rendition of Candyman, I think, speaks very well to um, what we have going on. And of course, can't forget about Get Out, and major shout out to Jordan Peele, because who would have thought that somebody was, as funny and hilarious as Jordan Peele could come up with something so iconic and interesting with Get Out, and how, is a great social commentary on things that are going on today, as well as what Lovecraft Country and Candyman has done. And another good reboot, dare I say, is the 28 version. The 2018 version of Halloween, which includes Jamie Lee Curtis once again in her iconic role, which the sequel is coming out in another week or two, maybe. But anyhow, to have someone like Danny McBride, another iconic funny character, funny comedian or comedic actor, to help create a new parallel into a beloved universe such as the Halloween universe. That is something that was quite awe-inspiring and just very well creative and done to be seen. And major shout out to him on doing that. So it's just really refreshing to see what has been done and what's been going on horror wise. There have been a few things here and there that make you say WTF, and of course, a lot of that, it doesn't matter actually what time frame, whether it's 70s, 80s, and 90s. You have a lot of WTF movies out there. I think, for example, anything that involves the name of H.P. Lovecraft, you would see some real crazy body horror type movies. So if you see, well, not in general in terms of the, how should I say it? You have like directors such as like the late Stuart Gordon from Chicago, and then Brian Usner. And if you follow like a lot of 80s horror like that, anything that had H.P. Lovecraft's names, like like John Carpenter Presents or something like that, but more like H.P. Lovecraft. If you see that, get ready for maybe to have like a bucket on side of you because um, that's just something else to be foreseen. Body horror is quite interesting, I think, especially with what we have going on. Um, it's just a spectacle to check out. Let's see, I got little comments here. Horror movies using Zoom or FaceTime. Yeah, those are kind of tripped out, especially with our current situation with the pandemic. Those are actually that's an interesting little subgenre because of course, that kind of kicked off with Blair Witch Project. Then you had Paranormal Activity series of films that happened where you would use like more scaled down, low budget environments and aesthetics to sorry, that's yeah, it's quite interesting. And to see stuff like movies like Unfriended, I want to say it was a movie called Host. It's just a lot of interesting ways how they try to create horror through that. Now, I will say on the independent side, another series of films I've enjoyed quite a bit is the VHS series because I'm a big time sucker for anthology films. So when it comes to anthology, VHS is a definite love letter for horror, horror aficionados. Um, Tales from the Hood is always going to be a big time favorite of mine. Sadly, the other two movies that came out um, should have never ever been made, and I just cringe when I see anything that involves Tales from the Hood 2 or 3. And nothing against Keith David and Tony Todd. I love those guys. I think they're amazing. They're awesome. It's just sad that they had to deal with a production of that nature. But the first Tales from the Hood is always going to be iconic. It's always going to be interesting. So I'm always going to, have a love for that. Um, the Creep Show movies were pretty cool in regards to anthology stuff. I also remember Tales from Dark Side movie because, of course, that spawned off from the TV series. Tales from Dark Side movie was pretty cool. There were a couple of cool segment stories in that I always dug. And anthology stuff, you just got to kind of dig deep in regards to not only just the anthology side of things, but just your place in horror in general for what you want to check out. And I feel like the independent side, film wise, is where it's at. Mainstream, it's okay. But thanks to like, your platforms like Netflix and Amazon, Hulu, they have given, a better cushioning to showcase a lot of indie horror. And I'm just been, gravitating to it. There have been some good ones. There are some bad ones. And again, when it comes to horror, you can only name so much stuff. And I feel like you just got a great variety to check out. So I've been seeing a lot of commentary here. And once again, shout out to a couple of folks who are watching. If anybody got any certain questions or anything, post comment, let me know. And, I'll chop it right to it. I'm just doing a little bit of a rambling of sorts and just, getting out my thoughts and feelings in regards to horror. Like I said, I am looking forward to this newest Halloween that is coming out, Halloween Kills, because it seems like this go around Jamie Lee Curtis, and her daughter and granddaughter are um, dipping out to go ahead and give that business to Michael Myers, and it looks like Anthony Michael Hall is joining in on the ride. 80s icon Anthony Michael Hall. And Anthony Smith said, yeah, it's going to be next weekend on Peacock. If you got the Peacock Network, it's going to appear on that. And it's also going to appear at the show. I'm debating about whether or not appearing at the show, but I'll spend an extra $5 to check it out on Peacock. So it's all good. Corey mentioned sci-fi horror. Now, sci-fi horror is definitely you definitely have got some faves in regards to sci-fi horror. When I think of sci-fi horror, I think of um, I guess you can say the original War of the Worlds could be included in that because similar to like Jaws or Alien, you didn't really see what the creatures look like till like towards the end of the movie. The aliens who were invading Earth, and it was really tripped out to see like all this destruction and damage, and was well done for a movie of that time period. Another one that comes to mind when it comes to sci-fi horror, the original Blob, as well as its remake. And the original Blob was uh tripped out popcorn horror flick, sci-fi horror flick that is iconic in so many ways to a lot of people. And then when you got that remake in '88, it stood more into it spoke out more in regards to the playing God with science, and as well as giving more of a darker, edgier approach to what this blob creature could do and how capable it is. And that was really, awe-inspiring with that. And you mentioned, oh, Anthony says the '80s version messed me up as a kid. Yeah, the '80s version of the blob was really a trip because the regular blob would just, it would gobble up a person. You just don't see him again like that. But when the '80s version struck, it was like it showed like the gory effects that took place if the blob had existed in that time period like it did. So yeah, the '80s version of Blob is something else. Definitely Alien. Alien was basically the best way I could say it. I respect it was Jaws in outer space, and I think what made Alien so iconic, a little bit more iconic in my opinion than Jaws, is the fact that with Alien you had an atmosphere to play with. You had a atmosphere of being in space. You had an atmosphere of being on spaceships where you didn't know what this thing was, what it could be, what it could do, how it blended into environments, and how quiet and sneaky and deadly it could be. And that's what really made Alien is so iconic the way it did. And of course, it spawned off an iconic heroine in the form of Ellen Ripley, aka Sigourney Weaver, which is still who is still looked up to this day. And then let's see, he said finally saw Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Great. Yep, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That's another great sci-fi horror classic because it was just tripped out to you know see something to where you had like an alien force that can replicate human beings and could, just take over the space and repopulate themselves. And that was wild. That was wild indeed. Sci-fi horror, great. Of course, can't forget about John Carpenter's The Thing. To me, John Carpenter's The Thing is the best interpretation of one of the best interpretations of horror because you did like Alien, like Jaws, you just did not know who this creature was gonna be. You didn't know how this creature was gonna react in terms of certain things, and it just gave you this ideal of not trusting anyone and everyone around you because you don't know who or what could attack you or how can they attack you. And John Carpenter put his foot up in that. And you got some iconic greats and Kurt Russell and Keith David involved in that. And to this day, I still watch The Thing with fresh eyes every other chance I get. And I think it and yes, Anthony, you were right. It still holds up. It's still amazing. Event Horizon is another one also. Event Horizon is off the chain in regards to what it did. It was like the best way I describe that. Like how I say Alien was Jaws in space, I would say Event Horizon was Hellraiser in space, quiet as kept. And that sense of dread that it put in upon of, what was happening on that ship. And then when you have iconic actors like Lawrence Fishburne and Sam Neill involved in it, it just, spruced it up, made it even better. So it's like Event Horizon is another great one in terms of sci-fi horror. Another form of horror that I kind of dig to a degree, comedy horror. Now, comedy horror is something that, depends on what, what your taste is. For me, comedy horror, when I think of that, I think Gremlins. Gremlins, it'll crack you up, but it can aspects that can freak you out or creep you up too. Ghostbusters, absolutely. Thank you, Corey. Ghostbusters is always going to be iconic as well. Both the movies of the original cast, those are, some go tos. Um, who else we got? Critters, which is almost basically almost Gremlins in space, except that they would like try to chew you up and run around like, savage little alien porcupines, and that would, yeah, just run around, eat you up, hit you with one of the little spikes. Let's see. Said Gremlins and Krampus, two of my favorites. Yeah, Krampus was a good one. Holiday horror was also another great deal because, horror ain't always got to take place during Halloween, obviously. And, Krampus, I think, did a great deal in regards to making Christmas scary. Because, of course, you had other things too, like your slasher joints like Silent Night, Deadly Night. But I think Krampus was definitely a real deal in terms of that. And that was well done. And kind of sort of wish you could have had a sequel to that. But, it is what it is on that. Another deal on the horror side that I can't think of. The Collector series. If you have not watched the Collector series, check out the Collector. You got the Collector, the Collection, and word is the third one is finally supposed to be happening. And it's been like almost 10 years since the last one came out, but that third one is finally happening. So the Collector is a great series because here you have a character almost similar to like Jigsaw from Saw, and basically this guy, who was a masked, freakish type character. He's basically imagine if somebody who was like masked up and he did kind of like Home Alone traps, but like stuff that can just like truly legit kill you, and he's tormenting you in the process and all that type of thing. That's what I think of when I think of the Collection. It's basically horror Home Alone. And again, check out that series. Indeed, I always look to that. Um, another thing that I do like that happened in regards to horror, especially with the stuff that came out in 2010s, not only in regards to the indie horror side, you got how movies like The Guest, Starry Eyes, You're Next. There's a couple other ones I can't think of at the moment, but those are some pretty good ones I just before mentioned, mainly because they kind of brought back the aesthetic of not only creating wonderful horror on a limited budget, but just stuff you can do, especially in regards to like music. Because especially if you grew up in the 80s, you had like that synthesizer or what they call retro new wave type soundtracks that kind of gave, a certain eerie yet cool sounding energy to the movies. I kind of like how movies like that brought that back into style. And I think, that choirs kept, that's what actually got me was in the synthwave music again because of movies like that. So I definitely dig on that indeed. Let's see. Anybody got any more questions, comments? Go ahead, hit me up. I'm only gonna probably wrap this up in a few more minutes. Um, Before I do gotta give a shout out to not only Corey Green and Anthony Smith who've been commenting and putting out the suggestions and so on. I do want to give a shout out to Brother Coachy Soul Star of Fly Nerd Entertainment. He he's big on the HP Lovecraft stuff. He's big on the horror stuff also. I also want to give a couple shout outs to a Facebook group that I'm part of, the Midnight Gallery. All my cool peeps out there who just, putting all the horror-ish out there, whether it's film, television, video game stuff, anything, everything related to horror. We chatted up about on that. So shout out, much love to them indeed. And trying to think. Yeah, it's pretty much all I can think of in regards to the horror talk that I've got going on today. I do definitely want to give mad shout out, mad love to everybody, anybody who have checked me out. Um, this apologize for any ranting and rambling I'm doing. I know I was kind of sort of all over the place, but at the same time, just kind of sort of started doing this thing again, trying to get my feet with a little bit more wet in this YouTube space to make things going, to get things working. Um, I did not see Malignant yet. I've heard about it. I am definitely gonna probably check that out maybe in the next week or so because I'm swamped on checking out other horror movie stuff as we speak. I want to go through a little bit more of the new season of Bite Size Halloween on Hulu right now, and a couple other joints that I want to check out. Um, well, I got a little bit more time, so I can do a couple quick reviews on some stuff that I recently watched in regards to horror stuff. Amazon Prime put out a couple things at yeah, they put out two movies last weekend. One was called Blackest Night. The other one's called Bingo Hell. These are more like comedy horror type deals that came out via Blumhouse. And oh yeah, shout out to Blumhouse indeed. They really have helped elevate horror to the level of awesomeness that it's in. So whether it's been the Purge series, Insidious, Blumhouse has, and even Get Out, Blumhouse has yet to kind of disappoint me. These two new iterations with Black as Night and Bingo Hell, again, they're supposed to be comedy horror. So whatever you can get out of it, whatever laughs you can get out of it, cool. For me, they were just okay. I mean, I was hoping for something a little bit more better, a little bit more edgier, but it is what it is. Blackest Night is basically a horror comedy about vampires, and it's basically about a young girl who hangs out in Louisiana with a couple friends that she has when she encounters vampires in Louisiana, and when she's bitten, she's kind of on this mission to find out who the vampire is so they can be killed off and she can get turned back to normal, basically to help save New Orleans. And that one was okay. I mean, some of the comic stuff they tried to do was all right. Major shout out though to once again to Keith David. He appears in the movie and he's probably like the only saving grace in my opinion in regards to that one. The rest of the movie was just all right. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't the greatest. I will give credit though; they did change up in regards to the vampire makeup on it. So Black as Night was all right. Bingo Hell, on the other hand, was a little bit better. I like the fact that with Bingo Hell, you had a movie that kind of featured senior citizen characters as your primary characters because very rarely your senior citizens are unfortunate cannon fodder for the killers or they're just like side characters to kind of sort of help elevate um the the vibe of the protagonist by being supporting characters or what have you. um for the most part, that one was okay. That was a little bit more comical than Black as Night was. But if you want to check those out, those two are happening on Amazon Prime right now. There was a new one that I did watch on Netflix earlier this morning called There's Someone in My House. And this kind of sort of speaks to if you are fans of Scream and or I Know What You Did Last Summer. Um, Basically, that movie, um, it really did a bang up job. It did a bang up job for what it was. I like the fact that it had the I Know What You Did Last Summer vibe of it, of, tormenting the kids via through like text messaging and things like that. Cause, we are living in our current times that we live in. I also like the fact that the killer was using these masks that were supposed to be in form of the people he killed, which was really kind of inventive. So it's like you see a character and then the killer pops up, but he's wearing the mask of a person he's about to kill, and that's really tripped out, really crazy. I also like the fact that they used a kind of a short form samurai sword, kind of like a 10, 12-inch samurai sword, I want to say, as opposed to like your traditional butcher knife or meat cleaver or things, something like that. So I did give a little bit credit on that one. And again, with your diverse archetypes that you had going on, that basically where almost everybody's representing this, it was pretty cool for what it was. I give it credit where credit is due. So if you are a fan of something like Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer, I would definitely check out There's Someone in My House. That's going on Netflix right now as we speak. And that's pretty much mainly all I got so far. So I thank everybody and anybody who did check out what I had to say here. I'm gonna try to go a little bit more on the commentary side. I want to get more people involved in regards to doing, you know, videos of that nature. And I think when you do stuff on the solo side, you want to put out as much content as possible. But again, you can only do so much with that. But I think we're getting more people involved, more film enthusiasts, that nature. Also, whether you want to cam up or whether you want to do like the little avatar thing, what I got going on right now, that's also cool. I just want to push this along, as much as I possibly can. And I'm not necessarily getting paid for it. It's just, something for me to do, kind of like as a, not so much just as a hobby thing, but just a love thing, because I love talking about film. I love what film has done for me in regards to being a safe space and just being as cool of a genre as it is, especially with something like the horror genre. So that's all I got going on with that. But anyhow, thank you for everybody who has joined me. If you ever want to, chop it up with me, let me know. Check me out here on YouTube. Check me out here on Instagram. I also got my page up on Facebook as well. It's Johnson Chat Live. And there you have it. So go ahead, stay safe, enjoy your Saturday, and I am out. Two finger salute.